So if you watched my last video, you'll know that I'm building a replacement to Lotus, my X99 based workstation. So far I have the case, the Cooler Master SL600M, which I made a small modification to enable me to fit 4 200mm Noctua NFA12 PWM fans in, and I have the power supply, a Cooler Master V1000 Platinum. But in this video, it's finally time for me to dive into the core hardware, starting with the CPU. And I'm going with a Ryzen 9 3900X, meaning that my workstation is switching from Intel to AMD. This is a 12-core, 24-thread CPU with a 3.8 GHz base clock and a turbo of up to 4.6 GHz. Now, my experiences with Ryzen so far have been less than ideal. Both first and second generation Ryzen gave me stability issues, especially in regards to memory. But I'm going to give it another go because 3rd gen Ryzen's price performance for content creation makes it really difficult to go in any other direction. I know that a lot of people out there are really loving these Ryzen chips, so I'm hoping that I've just been unlucky up until now and that I won't regret this decision. So this 3900X is going to be paired with an X570 Aorus Master motherboard, and out of all the boards on the market, this was my first choice. There's some really expensive boards in this generation, like you can spend £700 to £1,000 on an X570 motherboard, but the Aorus Master comes in at under the £400 price point, which I think is really the most you should be spending on a mainstream chipset motherboard, like say if your £800 motherboard purchases for Threadripper. Anyway, the X570 Aorus Master has almost everything I could ask for this workstation. I wanted an amazing VRM, and this, if the reviews are to be believed, is one of the best this gen, with a full 14-phase VRM and a decent heatsink. I wanted to go with purely M.2 storage, so the triple PCIe 4.0 M.2 slots were a must-have. Although the X570 chipset doesn't really have the PCIe lanes for you to go crazy with PCIe 4 drives and expect full bandwidth. So it is a very sleek looking motherboard with a mostly black and silver design, which will fit perfectly with my colour theme. There is some RGB lighting, but the board looks great without it on, and I can always set it to white or just a subtle static colour, so it is nice to have the option. The connectivity on this board is really, really good. It has Intel Wi-Fi 6 and a 2.5 gig Ethernet port, along with an Intel 1 gig Ethernet port. However, I did just get 10 gig NAS, so I need the 10 gig networking. This means I'll have to carry over my add-in card from the old workstation, which is less than ideal. Other than that though, this board looks perfect for me, so let's start loading it up. Starting with the CPU. This is actually the first CPU I've purchased in a very long time, the last one being the Haswell i7 4770K, if my memory is correct. And it's actually the first AMD CPU purchase that I've ever made. AMD's high-end CPUs just weren't competitive in the early years of my interest in PCs, but it's really good to see that all changing. So onto the SSDs, starting with the OS drive. My new primary workstation SSD being a 1TB Aorus PCIe 4.0 NVMe SSD. And to understand why I'm so excited about this, you must first know that my current workstation only has a 250 gig Samsung 960 EVO, and that's just not enough capacity for OS drives these days. So having 4 times the capacity is going to be so liberating. But then you look at the speed. The Aorus Gen 4 SSD can do up to 5,000 megabytes read and 4,400 megabytes write, which is a huge upgrade. It's also the heaviest M.2 SSD I've ever held. It's like a solid copper block. It's going to stand out a lot on the board against all the silver, but I think it would look really nice and tie in the Noctua tones a little. And I mean, if you've got an SSD this fast, then it should stand out, And I do love that the motherboard has very separate M.2 heatsinks, because some of the more integrated cover plate designs would look odd if you opted to use the copper heatsink instead of the motherboard's included one. But I think this looks amazing. I know some people out there won't like it, but I love it. But this isn't the only SSD that's going in this build. I'm also going to have an M.2 NVMe storage drive. I chose to go with the ADATA SX8200 Pro. This is a 2TB drive, which is twice the storage that my old build had. And whilst this isn't as fast as the Aorus drive, it ain't no slouch. With up to 3,500 megabytes read and 3,000 megabytes write. It's also faster than my previous primary drive, the 960 Evo. Plus, my old build was actually using standard 2.5-inch SATA SSDs for storage, so this is also a monumentally large upgrade in those regards. Originally, I was going to go with an Intel 660p for storage, following some excellent content from Tech Deals on the realities of QLC NAND. But this ADATA drive is TLC, so it doesn't have the drawback of QLC, plus it's much faster than the 660p, and it wasn't much more expensive, so it just seemed like a no-brainer. But that's all the drives that are going in this build for now. I have 2TB of fast, 1TB of silly fast, and an empty drive slot for future fast. Something that's really cool is that this is actually the first time that I'm not running a single SATA data cable on one of my builds, and I do think that this is the future. So next up is the memory. I've actually had a hard time sourcing memory for this build because it looks like the cooler I've chosen will overhang the first DIMM slot, but I won't know for sure how much by until I actually give installing everything a go. So I needed low height memory, and there's limited options there, especially now that 2 RGB memory heatsinks have taken over. But luckily, Team Group were kind enough to come to my rescue with their Vulcan said DDR4 memory, which is only 32mm tall. Now, this isn't as fast as I'd like, with it being a 3200MHz CL16 kit, and 3rd gen Ryzen performing best with faster kits than this. But honestly, after experiencing memory stability issues with Ryzen Gen 1 and Gen 2, and this being my mission critical workstation, I just don't want to be pushing the limits here. I'd much rather take a slight hit to performance and have complete stability. What is exciting here though is that these are 16GB DIMMs, meaning I'm going to be filling all 4 slots for a total of 64GB of memory. Going from a HDD2 platform with 8 memory slots down to a mainstream platform with only 4 slots meant I wanted to compensate by using higher density sticks. So this setup should be perfect for me, especially with the memory's minimalistic silvery grey heatsinks. So I guess that the last thing here to look at is the CPU cooler. And it should come as no surprise, given the case fans, that I've gone with a Noctua air cooler. This is the NHU12A. It offers very similar performance to the NHD15, but with a much smaller footprint, the NHD15 being what I'm using in my current workstation. I've been getting a lot of comments about how I should have gone for the black version of Noctua products instead. The problem with that though is that the new Chromux Black variants that have just come out are actually only available on older Noctua product designs. For example, the new NHU12S has a black NF F12 fan, and they are good fans, but they came out before this channel existed, and I've been using them in videos since 2012, so they're not exactly cutting edge. Whereas this cooler uses the new 5th generation flagship NF A12 fans. So don't let a stealthy colour theme fool you. If you want Noctua's best, it will look like this, which isn't a problem for me as I actually quite like it. Here's where things get complicated though. My case, the SL600M, doesn't have a rear exhaust fan grille. It uses a chimney design, with cold air intaking through the bottom and warm air exhausting out of the top. So I need to mount this cooler rotated 90 degrees. But the stock mounting kit doesn't actually allow for this. So I'm going to be using the NM AM4 UXS mounting kit instead, to mount it rotated 90 degrees. And fitting this, you can see just how little clearance I had for the first memory slot. I could have gone a little taller, but there was no way of knowing until I actually tried, and I didn't want to have to send anything back if it didn't fit. So apart from the PCIe cards, which I can't do here because I want to experiment with riser cables, this is the motherboard fully loaded up and ready to go. 12 cores, 24 threads, 64GB of DDR4 memory, a 1TB PCIe 4 SSD for my OS, a 2TB PCIe 3 SSD for storage, and a really nice CPU cooler. I must say I'm very, very happy with everything, and I can't wait to get this into the case and turn everything on for the first time. But that's going to be in the next video, which you should subscribe to get a notification for if you haven't already. I hope you don't mind me breaking up this build into smaller videos like this, so that the channel has more regular uploads, rather than me disappearing for long periods of time whilst working on just a single giant video instead. If you did like this video, please hit the like button, and also let me know what you think of my chosen components in the comments down below, and also what you'd do differently. So this video wouldn't have been possible without the support of my incredible patrons. They really are absolutely amazing. So just thank you so much to each and every one of you. And thank you all for watching.